Hello, and welcome to a special holiday episode of Tales from the Hearse. Tonight, we are in one of the oldest graveyards in Buncombe County, at the family site of the Davidson family. Yes, way back in the 1800s, the Davidsons first settled here, and Elias Davidson was the head of the family that I want to speak to you about tonight. What's that?
Come play with me. Come play with me.
Well, this site is one of the most haunted places in Buncombe County. That poor family, the Davidsons, suffered so much tragedy that people say that energy still lingers here to this very day. Well, let me tell you a little bit about that tragic history. Elias Davidson was a hard-working man. He did build his own house, separate from the original family homestead. He took a bride, a young woman named Rebecca. They were a happy couple, but Elias was, by all appearances, a very stern and quiet man, not one given to showing much affection. Well, he and Rebecca did have 2 daughters. First, Alana, and then 15 years later, another daughter named Colleen. Poor Rebecca struggled much in childbirth. She'd had several miscarriages between her 2 daughters. And unfortunately, at the time of giving birth to poor Colleen, Rebecca did not survive that birth. Elias went into a terrible depression. He withdrew even further into himself, leaving Alana, this poor 15-year-old girl, to raise her sibling sister. She did a remarkable job, quite responsible, more than anyone would expect of a teenager. But as the years went by, Alana, as you might expect, wanted a life for herself. She fell in love with a young boy named James McPherson, someone whom she had known all her life because they had indeed gone to church together in that little community. But that romance was doomed from the very start. It was just like the poor tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, for just like the Capulets and Montagues, the McPhersons and the Davidsons had a feud that went back for years and years. So this relationship was kept secret for quite a while. Alana would slip away when she had a moment to spend with her lover. Eventually, more and more time was spent with James, and little Colleen was left on her own to entertain herself. At first, she played with her little wood-carved animals that her Uncle Colin had made for her, but eventually she began to venture out, further and further from the house into the woods and the surrounding land. Well, one day, after Alana had been with James, she came back and found the house empty. All her calls for her sister as she called out, "Colleen," came without an answer. She searched high and low throughout the whole house. She went outside. She looked all around the parameters of the house, and no Colleen. Well, as she was panicking, looking around the house, her father, Elias, came in, and when he heard that Colleen was missing, he gave a stern look of disapproval, didn't have to say a word. Alana knew that her father was very angry with her, and off he went, and he gathered a group of men, including his brother, Colin, to form a search party. They searched the whole surrounding area, and eventually they came to the old Davidson family homestead, to a site where an old well had been built. It had been covered up, it had gone dry years ago, but they noticed that the boards covering the top of that well were now laid to the side. And when they looked and searched in that well, unfortunately they found what they were looking for, the body of poor little Colleen. Well, interestingly enough, leading up to that event, Alana had heard Colleen talking about a friend she had, a little girl named Brianna. Well, there was no child named Brianna anywhere in that vicinity, and Alana just dismissed it as being, perhaps an imaginary playmate, as children often do. Even in those days, they knew that children sometimes made up playmates for themselves when they were alone. So she had thought nothing about it. Well, if Alana had known a little bit more of her family history, perhaps she would have learned from Elias of a girl in the Davidson family years ago, a little girl named Brianna, who died in that very same well 50 years ago. Well, Alana was racked with grief nevertheless. She felt so badly about having left her sister, who then fell to her own horrible death. And her father had withdrawn even more, if that were possible, into himself, so that he had no contact with his daughter. So Alana got absolutely no warmth, no sign of compassion, certainly no sign of forgiveness from her father. She took solace where you might expect, with her lover, James. Now, in that cold November month, she told James that sometimes as she worked about the house, in the dark, gloomy corners, she sometimes thought she saw the hint of a child beckoning to her. Well, eventually she could stand it no longer, and she begged James to take her away from this. Well, the young couple had wanted to marry. They had made actually no secret between the two of them about those desires. But James had wanted to make a good place for her, a home for her, and prepare one when it was time to marry. But Alana could not wait any longer, and she pleaded with James, "Please take me away from here." So James agreed. He said, "Fine, I'll do it." But then something happened. Do you hear what I hear? There's a noise. It seems that one little visitor in this graveyard wants to be known. Perhaps that's a good place for us to stop, because that's all the time that I have for you this evening to tell this tale. There is quite a bit more to share with you, so you'll have to come back and hear the second part of this Christmas tragedy. But let me remind you in this holiday season that you can purchase my collection of Christmas-themed horror stories called The 13th Day of Christmas and Other Tales of Yuletide Horror on gestaltmedia.com, where you can also find many other books, psychological thrillers, and tales of suspense. Well, until next time, I leave you with this. There's more to the Davidson family history. Good night and farewell.